So welcome to Heal Your Inner Child, Date and Relate as a Healthy Adult. And I'll tell you a little bit about me for those of you who are new. Don't know if I'm in the way of the words. I have been on a transformational journey. Many of you know me quite well. You've worked with me. Some of you might be new. So I am a trauma-informed coach, a love, dating and relationships coach, and a midlife mentor. I am a well-being and mental health speaker and a TEDx speaker, and I also consult around mental health and well-being. I'm the author of the book that you see, well, you can't see it, but it is behind me on the screen as well, How to Fall in Love. And on the basis of my book and all the work that I have done, I have hosted numerous retreats and How to Fall in Love courses and workshops like this. And I have been married for 5 years this June, and with my husband as partners for how long? 10 years. And it wasn't like that in the beginning, or rather in my 30s and early 40s. I was single, I was confused, I was bemused, I was wondering why on earth all my relationships failed and why I wasn't able to be attracted to or stay with an emotionally healthy man, and why I kept falling for people who weren't emotionally healthy or well. So just admit someone. And I have been on my own healing journey for many years. Some of you know I used to work as a journalist, a political journalist and a foreign correspondent until I burnt out and broke down. I had an eating disorder, work addiction, alcohol abuse, dysfunctional relationships. And my journey so far, I'm 20 years in to my healing journey, and I have many, many more years to go. Welcome if you've just joined. Let me just check. So I'm making sure everyone's muted. If you'd like to participate, just pop a note in the chat and we'll be using the chat. And if you do want to raise your voice and speak up, you're very welcome to, but that will be on the recording. So that's a little bit about me. The photo in the bottom there is one of my retreats abroad. So early life wounds, I'd love you to participate. I've got some questions for you, and I'd like to invite you to write in the chat. And for me, these workshops, obviously it's a small segment of time, but I do pride myself on providing really valuable information, and I do really encourage you to engage with the questions that I ask and reflect on your own journey and use the chat to connect with others and to share, because what we're trying to do here is dislodge some of the stuff, some of the feelings, some of the patterns that are lodged inside us, and we're trying to move them around a bit. And we move them around by talking about them, sharing about them. Often we heal by physically moving as well, but we want to shake things up. So I would invite you to shake things up during this workshop. So if you're not normally someone to share in the chat, try doing that. If you need to sit and just reflect and take notes, do that. And I hope that some of you have some light bulb moments, more awareness, deeper awareness, that this increases your understanding of how you date and relate to others. And this isn't just about our romantic relationships. This is about all of our relationships. So I have a question for you to begin with, which is, did you experience a wound or a hurt or an emotional upset in your childhood? Or many, might have been more than one. So that's a simple yes, no, or maybe, or I don't know question. And you could start by popping that in the chat. And it's absolutely fine if you don't know. And the other question, so we've got a few yeses. The other question, and this is up to you how comfortable you feel about sharing, but can you describe that wound or that hurt, or those wounds or those hurts, with as little or as much detail as you would like? You know, you are responsible for your own well-being during this workshop, so you just share as much as you want. It could be divorce, it could be parent died, it could be I wasn't listened to, I didn't feel loved. So it could be any of those things. So, and when you put things in the chat, I won't, I'll share them without sharing your name, just to give people who'll be watching the recording a sense of other people's experiences, because that's how we heal and grow. So someone shares, grew up around abuse, done lots of work, including inner child work, and have had a habit of choosing partners who are not healthy. So perhaps we grew up in an environment that didn't feel loving or nurturing, that felt unsafe. So if you'd like to describe the hurt or the hurts, and if you prefer, just use your own notebook. Shouted at a lot by father. Oh, that's very poignant. I saw a post recently: when you shout at your children, they don't stop loving you, they stop loving themselves. Yeah. So our self-worth is, so when we're little, our parents are mirrors, and what we see in them is what we believe about ourselves. So if they're shouting at us, then we will interpret that to mean something about our worth and our value and how much we are loved. And if they leave, if they walk away, we will interpret that to mean something about us and our worth and value and how much we are loved. So pop anything else in the chat that you'd like to. And, you know, on the back of that comment, those of you who are familiar with childhood development and child development and psychotherapy. So in those early years, when we're young people, when we're children, we believe the whole world revolves around us, and therefore we believe that everything is our fault. And so that's where we pick up on these self-worth wounds. So my mum isn't happy, it must be my fault. My dad has left, it must be my fault. I didn't feel very good compared to siblings. The message I internalized was that I did not deserve to be taken care of. I'm reteaching myself. Brilliant. Brilliant that you're reteaching yourself. Parents had low self-esteem and were critical, so that had an effect, the effects of their divorce. Dynamics affected by having a mentally ill sibling. Yeah. So thank you for sharing these experiences. So these are the wounds, the hurts that we experienced. And, you know, it's quite easy to underestimate the impact that these things have on us. I think many of us are good at sort of, I'll talk about this in a moment, finding ways to survive. We are creative, intelligent beings. We find a way to get by, to survive. They're not always healthy ways, which we'll talk about in a moment, but we find a way. So grandparent death, weird friendship, complex friendship, loved her. She would physically hurt me, dug her nails into me. She had her own stuff going on. Yeah. So she was acting out. She was acting out, and you were receiving that. Silent treatment from mother has caused me to seek relationships with unavailable men. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. In case you hadn't guessed, that's a photo of me as a child. So some of you have already mentioned this, but I'd like you to, if you haven't, or you'd like to embellish a little bit on what you've said, the impact of those early life wounds. How do you think that those wounds, those hurts, impact or have impacted your adult dating experiences or relationships? And when I say relationships, I mean across the board. You know, many of you are here because of, you know, you need some dating or relationship support romantically, but others struggle with, maybe you found that, maybe you've worked with me already or worked with someone else and you have found your way to a healthy romantic relationship. But I know some of you continue to work with me because you struggle with your relationship with your work and achieving your dreams and being who you want to be in the world. So just if you'd like to share and haven't already, the impact of those early life wounds on your present day relationships. I'll just give you a moment to do that if you're typing. I'm going to move the slide forward, but if you are typing, please carry on doing so. So I'll just read what's popped up now. I was convinced that a positive, healthy man would not stay with me. It's really sad realizing this. So I chose men I thought would stay with me, and that felt secure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So choosing people that won't leave, irrespective of, you know, how else they behave towards us. Choosing people who won't leave. So yeah, if you're still typing, please carry on. I'll just see there's a few other things popped up. Accepting treatment that most people would say is unkind and most people would leave. Excessive trying to make it work and taking the blame. Yeah. So that, what I hear with that is it comes from a place of I am wrong. There must be something wrong with me rather than the other person. And what we often do in that dynamic is we rationalize bad behavior. We excuse bad behavior or poor treatment, or we just excuse something that definitely isn't going to work. We try and make it work. Yeah, so that's driven from the wound. So Nana's death, everyone was so upset, being very aware of loss, feeling like I don't have much of a family and clinging on. Set me up to accept people hurting me and rationalizing it. Yeah, so that's the word I just used. Because of the wound, the childhood wound, we have this innate, some of us have this innate belief that there's something wrong with me. I am faulty. I am not good enough. I'm not worthy. I am less than. My needs don't matter. And then we accept poor treatment and rationalize or excuse it. I'll just tell you a little bit about my wounds. So perhaps you can relate. So my mother was emotionally disconnected to herself, from herself, and therefore really struggled to connect to me. She had her own mental health, emotional health challenges, which I thought were my fault. And I was talking about this morning. I I developed the core belief that I've ruined my mother's life, and that keeps coming up. Now, I just to show you how strong this stuff is, I absolutely know that my now husband adores me and thinks I'm great. And as he says, he's with me because of everything, not in spite of everything. But there's a little part of me that every now and then feels that I need to ask, have I ruined your life? Um, have I messed up your life? Like, were you happier without me? And I can't, yeah, it's hard for me to admit that I actually still say that, but there's a little bit of me, and it's helpful to realize how deeply this goes so deep, right to my childhood. I thought I had ruined my mother's life by being born. Therefore, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable, I'm not welcome. I ha I don't have healthy self-esteem. It's all my fault. And then I've got to fix it all. So that sets me up to be a control freak and a workaholic and a fixaholic. So, and as I just talk about this about my mom and dad, I will say, we have to go through our own processes with our parents. Often, obviously we want to get to a place of forgiveness and a place of understanding that they did the best they could with what they had. Sometimes we bypass that. Sometimes we go straight to forgiveness and we bypass an important stage of really getting in touch with our feelings, really getting in touch with the hurt and the anger and letting it out. And that's partly what I want to talk about today. So obviously we want to get to the place of acceptance, forgiveness, understanding, compassion. And I have huge compassion for my parents, especially my mother. I don't know enough about my dad's history, but my mum, I have huge compassion for her and understanding and acceptance. But I had to get through the stage of anger because otherwise I'm invalidating my feelings. I'm dismissing them. I'm making it all okay, making the bad stuff okay. So just be aware of that. If you thinking, well, I want to be a good adult and a good person and I want to forgive and they had a hard time. Absolutely. But don't bypass the process of feeling your feelings and validating them. So my mum was emotionally disconnected. She used alcohol and food to numb her feelings. She wasn't connected to herself, couldn't connect to me. My father was emotionally distant. He had very blurred boundaries. Um, he, yeah, there was a lot of infidelity when I was a little girl, which I probably was aware of, but wasn't aware of, if you know what I mean. I felt unsafe, unseen, unwanted because I thought I'd ruined my mum's life. So my feelings when I expressed them of confusion or anger at what was happening were not validated. They were dismissed. There was alcoholism, not just with my mum, but with her boyfriends. And that set that was a unhealthy environment. It felt dangerous, that environment with drunk men who were my mum's boyfriends. Divorce, again, thought it was my fault. I must have done something wrong if dad's leaving. Because as I said, we as children, it's all about us. It's like the world revolves around us until we mature. That's how it feels. So it has to be my fault. And I found ways rather than well, I didn't have the capacity at the time to feel my feelings or heal them because there was nobody around to help me to do that. There wasn't a healthy adult around to help me to process my pain. So I suppressed it with food, excess food, binge eating under eating, overeating, yo-yoing from a very early age, alcohol as soon as I could get to the pub at the age 14. I was drinking, compulsive work, compulsive achievement, sex, or unhealthy relationships, busyness. So if you think about the wound, here's the wound, and I put all this stuff on top of it and I stuff it down and I numb it and I anesthetize it, then I don't feel it, which helps me to survive what's happening and actually helps me to more than survive, like get to Oxford University, become a journalist for Reuters, travel around the world. It helped me to more than survive. But these coping mechanisms were really unhealthy, and ultimately they stopped working, and I had to learn a different way. So the wound is there, and if we don't have people around us at the time to help us to process it, then it's raw. It's still there, and it's ripe for being triggered. And I'll talk about triggers in a moment. So attachment is the key. Some of you are familiar with attachment and attachment theory. I'm not going all the way into it, but this is a core framework that I think is really helpful to understand. So we're talking about a wound or hurt or emotional stress or emotional upset. So that's what many of us experienced. You've all shared some of your experiences. So there's an equation that's really helpful. So stress plus attachment is stress. So if you have a healthy attachment in your life at the time of the stress, so say your parents are getting divorced, you're age 10, and you've got a really wonderful auntie who's helping you to go through it and to understand that it's not your fault, or your parents are emotionally well, they're getting divorced, but they're emotionally well and healthy, and they can tell you that it's not your fault and you're securely attached. So stress with good, healthy attachment is stress, and we can overcome that without so much difficulty. Stress without attachment is trauma. And I know many of us, especially, for me, this word trauma, it's I've been doing this healing journey for 20 years. I'd say the word trauma popped up in the last 6. So it can be hard to get our heads around, but trauma is the Greek word for wound. And we have all shared in the chat a form of wound. So stress without attachment is trauma or wound. And then we have this wound, and then we have to try and find a way to heal it. Otherwise, it sabotages our relationships. So developmental trauma or hurt. So if trauma is a difficult concept, if you don't relate to it, because I know many of us think trauma has to be this like newsworthy, huge event. All our events are newsworthy, but sometimes we have to think that it has to be this really bad thing that happened to someone else. If you look into trauma and read about it, it can be as simple as not having our needs met, being emotionally neglected. Neglect, abuse. There's lots of different. It comes into lots of different ways. And yes, you can say trauma with a small t, not a large t. But we can also call it hurt. So if you think about our developmental needs, I'll just run through this briefly. As children, we have needs to be seen, to be soothed, and by being seen and by being soothed, we feel safe and secure. So if you were seen in your pain, and if you were soothed, if your feelings were soothed appropriately, then you feel safe and secure. If you weren't seen, so say you've got lots of feelings. I had lots of feelings about my mum drinking. I expressed them. They weren't validated. They weren't met. I wasn't seen. So I'm not seen. I can't trust my feelings. I can't trust my intuition. I feel anxious with people and in the world. I feel unsafe and I feel insecure. So I've written fear, fear, fear because it's all about fear. It's about the fear that we have inside that gets lodged during these early life experiences. And then for the rest of the years, we're just trying to find a way to manage that fear in whatever way we can. So just have a think. Did you feel seen and soothed? And did you feel safe and secure? From the experiences that you've shared, I don't think that happened all the time to anyone on this workshop. And just think about the extent to which you felt unseen and therefore had anxiety and you felt unsafe and insecure. So I mentioned fear, fear, fear. And, the fears show up in different and sometimes confusing ways. So I can speak from my own experience, and also, this crops up all the time with my clients on my courses, retreats, and so forth. So I fear abandonment, but I also fear intimacy because if I have true intimacy, my experience of intimacy with my parents, my experience of close relationship with my parents was that that I would be left, that I would be abandoned, that my needs wouldn't be met. So I fear abandonment, but I also fear intimacy. I fear rejection and I crave acceptance, but I also fear acceptance because if you really accept me and love me, then you truly see me. And what if you don't like what you see when you truly see me? So I want it, but I don't want it. I fear not being seen because I've had that experience and it's not nice. So I really want you to see me. I really want you to see me. But I fear being seen because if I'm seen, maybe that's dangerous. Maybe if I pop my head above the parapet, or maybe if I have success, maybe that won't be welcome. So I fear not being seen and I crave being seen, but I also fear being seen. And I fear not being loved. So I crave love. I really want you to love me, but I fear being loved because my experience of love hasn't been good. It's been hurtful. It's been painful. So I wonder if you can relate to those dual elements, and if you'd like to pop anything in the chat. Can you relate to fearing abandonment, but also fearing intimacy, to fearing rejection, but fearing, that real acceptance that comes from a healthy, intimate relationship? Because what if they truly see me? And we fear being seen and not seen, and being loved and not loved. And these questions, if we have experienced challenging childhoods, for me, I feel like many of my years from my teens and onwards was, how do I stay safe? Who do I need to be to stay safe? Who do I need to be in this relationship so that you won't leave me? How do I get love? And how do I run away from love? Because love is frightening, because it hurts. And yeah, so you can relate. Some of you can relate. Contradictory feelings. I've associated intimacy with abuse. So intimacy is scary even when I want to need it. Yeah. So I want it, but I fear it. Yeah. So this sets us up for the pull, push, push, pull. And this was a classic characteristic of my relationships. So we've got two adults in this picture, but if you can just imagine the child within. So I want to be close to you, but I have experiences of closeness that are really hurtful. So I want to be close to you, but I don't want to be close to you because it's frightening. So the child is within, both the man, the woman, the person. There's the child within who has early life experiences that form our thoughts and our behaviors. So we push and pull and pull and push. And, this was literally my experience. So I would chase someone, chase someone, chase someone, get close to them, and, like loved the whole chase thing. And then as soon as they got close to me, I would push them away because I was terrified. As soon as they showed that they were interested in me, I would push them away. And if an emotionally healthy person came anywhere near me, then I would run away. And I would be magnetically drawn to emotionally unwell people because I wouldn't have to do the intimacy thing. It was really attractive because I wouldn't have to do the full-on intimacy if the other person was emotionally unavailable. So these are our buttons. And so just think of our wounds like all these little buttons, these like sensitive spots. This is the bit where my dad shouted at me. And this is the bit where mum told me off for telling her to stop drinking. And this is the bit where my brother was jealous of my success. And this is the bit where my sister hit me or said something horrible to me. And this is the bit where my friend in school said I was ugly or whatever. These are our buttons. These are our early life experiences. And they are ripe to be pressed if they haven't been processed and healed, if the wounds haven't been processed and healed. So often if we can pause in the moment and think, this situation reminds me of, why am I activated? So when I say activated, I mean the nervous system. So sometimes we're in a really calm state. Maybe you're hanging out with someone and that's a really nice relationship and you feel really calm. But on other occasions, you might be on a date or chatting to your boss and you feel activated. So it's like your whole body, it's like adrenaline starts surging and your heart starts beating and your hands get sweaty. So I'm activated. So my nervous system is on high alert. And that's because something has been triggered in one of those early life wounds has been triggered. So it's a bit like having an open wound and someone has put their finger in it and that really hurt. So my buttons are being pressed. So this situation reminds me of, this person reminds me of. These are really good questions to ask if you feel that trigger, if your nervous system is activated. And obviously our goal is to try and maintain to a reasonable degree, like a sense of calm in the storm and to try not to be so triggered because it's not good for us to have our stress levels spiking all the time. Yeah, and somebody shares they were football in the middle of the parents' push and pull. Yeah, I actually have an image in my head of that. And I don't even know if it's true or if it's an image I created from the experience, but there's the dining room in the house and dad is at one door, mum is at the other door, and I'm running between them. I think I wrote about that in my book. I don't know which one to go to. And that's really confusing. And it's even more confusing if they are active in that push-pull, if they're like pulling and pushing and being unkind to each other. So here's a sort of visual representation. I thought it was quite helpful to just put the child, that's me, the child, and if we put that child into the adult's body. So say you are having an argument with someone or someone says something really triggering, and this doesn't have to be on a date, it could be in any situation. So I feel rejected. I feel like I was, like when I was 5 years old, when sibling said something or dad said something. So because that initial wound hasn't been healed, it gets triggered, it gets activated. And then we go into kind of an automatic response. So I have some I have a workshop on this that was one of my workshops that I ran in the past that you can have a look at and invest in around our triggers, managing triggers to form healthy relationships, I think it's called. But our trauma responses, we can classify them into fight or flight or freeze or fawn. So if I am triggered, if my wound is triggered, I might go into fight. So I might fight myself, binge eating, self-harming in some other way. I might fight the other person. So I might start judging or criticizing or shouting at them, pushing them away. I might flee. So I might go into flight. So I might run away. I might get very busy. I might throw myself into work. So flight shows up in lots of different ways. I might fight, flight, freeze. I might freeze. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with that experience where you just lose your voice in a relationship, in a conversation, in an argument. You lose your voice and you don't know what to say. And only 2 hours later, when the stress response has lowered, do you think of something brilliant that you really could have said. And that's because in the freeze response, the brain reduces to the size of a pea and it just doesn't work. And we can't argue. We can't get our words out. We freeze. So what we need to do in that situation is remove ourselves, try and process, try and bring ourselves back into our healthy adult. And then we can re-engage. And then we might fawn, which is people please. So we might bow down to the other person, lower, put ourselves on the floor like a doormat. And we might make sure the other person's okay at a cost to us. And I have a workshop that some of you came to on codependency, which you can buy. It's not very expensive. For those of you who want the recording, overcoming codependency. So, we might respond by making the other person feel okay, even though it's not good for us. And then in the case of the guy in this photo, he feels criticized and he doesn't have a normal reaction. He has an extreme reaction because it reminds him of when he was 7 years old and he walks away. Whereas, the healthy adult response would be to engage. Hang on a minute. When you said that, can you explain what you meant? Because I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by the comment, or I'm feeling a bit uneasy, but he is super triggered, so he leaves. So he is triggered into a child. I'm just going to read something that's come in. Let's see if it's relevant. Of course it's relevant, but I'm gonna come back to that because I want to comment on it, but I'm going to do so in a little bit once I finish this bit. If you'd like me to comment on it, so maybe pop that in the message. I have another example here. So here we have the child within saying, "Love me, don't leave me, don't abandon me." And perhaps this woman here is triggered by a behavior that the other woman is doing, which might be, she might not want to leave. She might not want to abandon, but there's something that she said or done that that triggers the other woman into her child. So then she is craving, love me, don't leave me, don't abandon me. And then that triggers the other person. So she is feeling suffocated and trapped. So this is a dynamic that often shows up, and it's a classic, and to generalize, it's a classic man-woman dynamic, but I'm sure it's there in every gender. So I know it from my own experience. So I chase. So here's the man. I want you to love me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. And he is triggered in his fear of suffocation and fear of being trapped is triggered, and he's going off that way. And I'm chasing and I'm chasing. I'm chasing. And I've actually done the same. I have felt because in my relationship with my mother, I often felt suffocated or trapped. So if somebody really wants to be with me, then I can feel suffocated and trapped, and I can want to run away. So just think about that dynamic. I wonder if you can relate to the fear of suffocation and feeling trapped, which is something that takes a bit longer sometimes to become aware of. I became aware of that after quite a while. The don't leave me, don't abandon me, that's kind of often more closer to the surface. But I don't want to be suffocated or trapped can be a bit deeper. So just perhaps you're welcome to comment in the chat just while I have a look at this message that came directly to me. So me trying far too hard, staying around far too long with someone who's being unkind because they are feeling triggered when I want to just talk things through with them about them hurting me, and then I get blamed. So you didn't see that growing up, but just realized that this is what my mum says she experienced from my dad. Yeah, so that would suggest that even though perhaps you weren't conscious of seeing it when you grew up, it was present when you were growing up. But what I hear is that you're seeking clarity. You want to talk about why the other person is not being kind to you, and they're not emotionally available. So they are triggered by your request for clarity, that you're trying to get your needs met. They don't want to meet your needs. They can't meet your needs. And you're going like this and they're going like that. And what we want to do in this situation is take care of our own needs as best as possible, and then make a healthy decision as to whether this person can or can't meet our needs. Because often we're abandoning ourselves in that situation. If you think about this chasing, we're abandoning ourselves. And we're not respecting ourselves, and we're not valuing ourselves, and therefore we're teaching the other person how to treat us, not to value us, not to respect us. So that image reminds me of my mother with that anxious attachment, and it makes me want to remove myself. Yeah. So I had a similar dynamic of for me it was thinking that it was my job to make mum happy. Mum was never happy, and like I went off and did my and what's the word? I went off and flew all around the world and did all this stuff, but I carried this heavy weight on my back of mum isn't happy and it's my job to make her happy. And that was really suffocating, and I felt like it clipped my wings. And therefore in my mind, a romantic relationship would clip my wings. And this is a common, well, it definitely comes up in my one-to-one coaching. Like, it's going to take from me. It's going to clip my wings. It's going to hold me back. And that was something that I definitely felt. And, my truth and the experience of many of my clients is, that is our childhood fear. That is the trigger. But a truly healthy relationship won't clip our wings and won't hold us back. It will build us up. But because we often get drawn towards what is familiar, because it's family and it feels safe and comfortable, then we're often drawn to people. Until we heal, we're drawn to people who will replicate that experience. So maybe I'm drawn to people who are going to hold me back until I get well, healthy myself. People often get into fights when they don't have enough space. Fighting is a way to push away, to try to get space. Yeah. So it creates distance, doesn't it? Fighting creates emotional distance. So get away from me emotionally. So some of the resulting behaviors that we've already talked about that happen if we are operating, if our inner child is activated or not healed, is we date with a craving. So we have this big hole inside, this big empty hole that's missing love. And so this hole is validation. I need validation. I need love. I need affection. I need all the things I didn't get as a child. And I date with a craving. And that means we end up vulnerable to being manipulated or abused. We end up ignoring our intuition and going for people who aren't good for us. So just think about whether you're dating with a craving, and is it the child within who is who didn't get her needs met, and still that healing needs to happen. And this isn't just about dating. You know, we could be working with a craving. We could be constantly seeking validation. I never feel enough. I'm trying to get my boss to meet that need that the parents didn't meet. So another behavior is we stay silent about our needs and wants. So yeah, we don't express our needs and wants. We're afraid to do so. We don't think we can. We don't think we're worthy of doing so. We accept poor treatment, which we've already discussed. We stay in a relationship well beyond its sell-by date. So, you know, deep down, we know we need to get out, but we stay because the inner child is running the show. She is in the driver's seat. This is key, and I'd really love you to hold on to this idea of acting in your best interests. So if we haven't healed, we struggle to act in our best interests, and this is codependency. That's a very generic term. Sorry, codependency has many different aspects to it, as I shared in that other workshop, but it can be summed up as struggle to act in our best interests. So again, we talked about the fear of the inner child. So if I am in my child, if my child is running the show, I will. Here are some examples. You might do some of these, or you might do different things. In my case, I will criticize and judge the other person because that creates distance and means that I don't get close. So I don't have to risk my heart. I don't have to risk getting hurt. I will find fault with the other person. I will push them away, and I'll keep searching for perfection. So I'll rule everyone out and keep searching for Mr. Perfect, because that's an ideal way to stay out of relationship, is to keep thinking that there's someone better out there, which is what I did for many years. If I'm in a relationship, I'll hold on for dear life at all costs. I'll act against my best interests. I'll subordinate my needs and wants. I might put the other person on a pedestal. So I wonder if you can relate to these. Yeah, feel free to share if you can relate to these. I just want to stress the criticism and judgment because it crops up a lot, and it's not as obvious. It can masquerade as healthy behavior. So, oh, I don't like the way he does this. I don't like the way she dresses. I don't like the way they speak, or, you know, if you've read my book, you'll know all the reasons I criticize my poor long-suffering husband. Um, his nose, his teeth, his ambition or didn't have enough of it, his car, his job. And thank goodness I realized that basically my inner child spotted that this was a potentially healthy, intimate relationship that we could have. And she ran for the hills. And to run for the hills, she came up with all these reasons why he wasn't going to be good enough. And she went off in search of someone else until the healing happened. And I understood that that this was a good, safe, healthy person. And all those fears that I had weren't warranted. And that actually, just because love meant hurt in the past, it doesn't have to mean hurt today. Love can mean wonderful things today. Just because love meant abandonment in the past, it doesn't have to mean abandonment today. So yeah, many of you can relate to that. And I also just wanted to highlight, you know, for some of us, if we're in a relationship or even if we're in a work situation, or a friendship, it can feel so painful to end and to walk away. And then, you know, maybe when we end something, we can't stop thinking about it and it feels excruciating. And we think we need to go back. So experience is the architect of the brain. So experience builds the brain. And, you know, if my experience, so if my needs aren't met as a child, I feel like I'm not going to survive. So when my dad left, you know, I've got this feeling that it's my fault. My mom isn't really coping, so I'm not going to survive. So my heart is breaking and I'm not going to survive this. And sometimes we get triggered by endings into this extreme child place of hurt. And then we try and control it. Maybe we try and get it back, or we can't stop thinking about it. And coming to terms with an ending often involves coming to terms with those early life traumas or hurts or endings, you know, those moments when we didn't get our needs met. And the more we heal those early life wounds, the more we'll be able to do endings in healthy ways. I just wanted to highlight this for anyone who isn't here necessarily for the romantic side of things, but you know, I talked about the push-pull, and this push-pull can show up in so many different ways. And, you know, fear of romantic success, but also fear of success in other areas. So I want success, but I don't want success. I want to be seen, but I also want to hide because being seen is dangerous. So this has showed up for me in my career, and I work, you know, in my midlife mentoring. I work with women who are trying a new path or leaving a job and starting again, or, you know, fulfilling their creative ambitions, doing what they were always meant to do. But it's frightening. I want it, but I don't want it. I want it, but I fear it. My success isn't welcome. All these core beliefs, being seen isn't safe. So, you know, if that's you, be aware that your inner child might be running the show. So we want to heal the early life wounds. And some of you will have ideas of how to do this, and you're welcome to share them in the chat, and I will share some, and I'll invite you to think about some others. So, you know, I talked at the beginning about this absence of attachment. So stress minus attachment equals trauma. So the way we heal is we bring in healthy attachments to our lives. And that starts with ourselves, obviously. Because what many of us do is we don't build a healthy attachment with ourselves. And then we've got this massive attachment need which we plop onto someone else who isn't the right person. So we put this massive attachment need onto our job, for example, and then we work our socks off and burn out because we're so desperate for to be seen, to achieve stuff, to feel safe. So this attachment needs goes onto our job, or we put this attachment need onto someone who can't meet it, a partner, a date, and they can't meet it. And then we re-traumatize ourselves. So the first attachment we want to work on is our attachment to ourselves. And I know many of you are on this journey, and I celebrate all the work that you are doing and have done. And we continue to do more, don't we? And I do every single day. So this healthy attachment. So for example, in my case, there was a lack of sense of safety in my early life. And what that led to were crazy, dangerous behaviors because they felt familiar. So, in physical terms, I'll jump out of planes and I'll jump off bridges and I'll hitchhike on deserted highways in Australia on my own, and I'll end up in Mexico with a gun to my chest and a knife to my throat. And those things happened. I'm replicating my childhood experience of always feeling on the edge. And then as I heal, I stop putting myself in so much danger. I stop sleeping with people when I'm drunk. I stop living on the edge with my finances. And I start to create a sense of inner safety for myself. So I give myself what I wasn't given. So inner safety might be important for you. So how do you create that? It depends on your particular wound around safety. I mean, for me, I have to create it in every area, and I have to work really hard on this. I have to try and create it financially by, and this isn't easy as a self-employed creative person. I have to try and create sort of systems that work so that I feel secure financially. I have to create safety through how I manage my time so that I'm not always on edge and adrenalized. I create safety by choosing healthy people to hang out with rather than the edgy people. So when I was dating years ago, I would always be drawn to people who were kind of edgy, a bit dangerous. And then as I healed, I was drawn to my now husband, who just gives me the most incredible sense of safety and peace. But I found that boring before because I wasn't used to it. So do you need to create safety for yourself? And feel free to comment on any of these questions and what you can do to create these things for you. Do you soothe your pain? Can't read all the questions. Is that okay? I'm going to read them out. I'm just wondering why. Can anyone else read all the questions? Oh, I'm in the way. Okay, I don't know how to move myself. I don't actually know how to move that little drawing of myself, so I'll read them out. Do you soothe? Actually, I can probably, oops, no, I'm just going to mess things up if I try and do that. I can probably put them in the chat. How about that? I'll do that. Oh, I think you can see the, I think you can see them in the chat. Right. So do you soothe your pain? I'm on to the second one. Do you soothe your pain by sharing it or writing it down? Or do you dismiss it or numb it? So I obviously shared about my binge eating, compulsive exercise, sex, drinking. So that was me running away from my pain and escaping from it. So do you share it with others? Do you acknowledge it and validate it? That's the next question. Do you validate your feelings? So do you notice your feelings? Do you take time and space and feel them? Do you share them with others? Do you write them down? Or do you dismiss them or numb them? And when I say write them down, there's lots of different things we can do. We can journal. We can just write our feelings down in the mornings or whenever. If we're triggered, just get if you feel triggered, if you feel activated, get into the habit of getting your pen and paper and just writing how I feel hot, I feel triggered, I feel angry. Just get into the habit of writing them down. Um, there's an exercise I do with my coaching clients, and it's also in my foundations course around inner child writing. So we do non-dominant handwriting. So you write in your hand that isn't your usual hand, and you try and um, channel the inner child, and you hear what the child needs to say, whether that's pain or anger or hurt, and then you write back to the child. Um, and if you're working with me one-to-one or on my course, that's something we can do together. So you validate your feelings, write them down. Can you trust yourself? Are you a trustworthy person? Do you follow through on your promises to yourself? So this is something I really struggled with. Like, I promised myself some rest or some play or some fun. Do I follow through? Am I trustworthy? So imagine there's the child inside, and her experience of parenting hasn't been good. So perhaps she's been criticized and judged. Perhaps she couldn't trust her parents. Perhaps they didn't let her play. So I need to give her a different experience of being parented, and I need to be the parent. So can she trust me? Can she trust me to take care of her schedule, to let her go out and play, to have some sunshine, to swim in the sea? Do you take good care of your needs and wants? This is similar to the one above. Do you take good care of your needs and wants? Do you pause and identify, I need a drink of water? I'm going to take a drink of water. Or do you push on through without taking a drink of water? I wonder how many of you carry on working when you really need the toilet. I do that sometimes. Do you care for yourself consistently? So many of us experienced inconsistent care. So we do to ourselves what was done to us. So we care for ourselves inconsistently until we learn to do different and learn to do differently. So then we care for ourselves consistently. And it's not easy, and nobody does it perfectly. But try for consistent self-care. It's easier if we've got a buddy or a group or a coach or a therapist reminding us to consistently care for ourselves. Are you a good parent to yourself? So, if you imagine that you've got this child within, do you treat them, do you give them a balanced life with good food and nutrition and plenty of water and sunshine? Do you make them sit at the computer all day without any water? Do you parent yourself well? Someone shares about trusting yourself. I would have said yes, but then when you said, do you follow through? I can be a bit flaky with myself and following through. Yeah, ouch. So yeah, it's hard when we see that we don't follow through on the promises that we make to ourselves. It's human, all human. That's why everyone goes for having a coach or a fitness coach or a personal trainer, or it's human. But often it comes from this wounded child place. So another technique which is helpful for when we're feeling triggered, like when we feel activated, or when we can really tell that the child has taken the driving seat, is to ask what part of me is triggered. So when I say inner child, that's kind of an umbrella term for inner baby, inner toddler, inner child, inner teenager. So if you think about development, any child's development, it goes through different stages, and a child has different needs. If you look at the baby needs this soothing and nurturing and needs to be held and held close. The toddler needs a little bit of freedom to go out and explore, but they need to know there's a secure base to come back to. The toddler also needs to rage and rant a bit and say, I hate you, and rebel. And then the teenager needs, I never rebelled as a teenager, not at least not when my parents were around. I rebelled in secret, not not in the face of my parents. I didn't push back. I didn't shout back. I didn't argue. I tried that once and it went really badly and I never did it again. So is there an inner rebel who needs to come out? So think about, the teenager, the inner child, the inner baby, the inner toddler, they all have different needs. So which part of me is activated right now? And how can I meet that part of me? How can I meet their needs? So this takes time. For some of us, it's a new language and we need to get fluent in it. It's about growing in self-awareness, becoming aware of your unmet needs. So a couple of questions that you might want to answer in the chat or in your journal. Be a good parent to yourself. What does this mean to you? What does this look like to you? How can you meet your own needs? How can you heal your early life hurts? How can you validate your pain? Am I seen, soothed, safe, and secure? They are really important questions, the 4 S's of healthy development. So you might want to just answer those questions if you'd like to. What does being a good parent to yourself mean? You can answer that in a self-care context. You could answer it, and if you don't have time to do this now, do this after the workshop. You could answer this in a dating context, in a romantic context. What does being a good parent to myself mean? If I was a good parent to myself, how would I date? How would I relate? You could answer it in a professional context. So feel free to share on that if you'd like to. I'll have a look at anything that comes up. I'll just move on because I'm aware of the time, but so often, we talked about that healthy attachment with ourselves. Another stage of healing is the healthy attachment with others. Now, this often we find this in a professional way by seeking out a professional, so a therapist or a coach or a counselor or a mentor or some form of healer who provides that healthy attachment. So who is able to see us and hear us and soothe us, with whom we feel safe and secure, with whom we feel supported, with whom we connect. We feel validated by these people, feel like someone's got your back. And this is what I hope and I believe I provide for my clients. But you want to have a think about in your life, do you have some healthy attachments that help you process? And what we're looking for are, people who get this, who get what we're talking about, because not everyone does. Some people will dismiss your feelings. They might not understand the whole inner child thing. So we want to choose people wisely. And that happens when we heal as well. We choose people wisely. So someone shares about, yeah. So this is being a good parent to self in a dating context. Trust myself if I feel something is wrong and I need to discuss it with someone I'm dating. If their solution is to blame me, then leave and don't excuse it. Yeah. So we're talking about not rationalizing poor behavior and not ignoring our intuition. Now, this is a lot easier to do if we have this, what's on the screen, if we have healthy attachments with others who are able to be our kind of backstop, who have our back, who we can check things out with and say, this person said this. Is this, is this my fear? Is this my intuition? Is this reasonable? Or is this out of order? Checking things out with other people is really valuable. And similarly, wing women or wing people. So I was searching for some photos of women together, and then I realized that I have my own from my retreats, Dorset retreat and Turkey retreat. So what I find really helpful, and this is why I've done a lot of my own healing in groups, and why I host groups of women looking for healthy relationships, is we can say, if someone is reacting to something on a date or in a relationship, we can validate their feelings and say that's perfectly worthy reaction, a valid reaction. Why not check it out with them? Why not communicate with them? Or that's a red flag. Yeah, it's don't hang around. Or we can see if a person has been triggered into their child, and we can encourage them to stay. So we can encourage them to stay and work it out with the other person. So it's important to try and find networks of people that, as I said earlier, that get what you're trying to do. Because, I know when I was dating, there were some people who just, if I would say, oh, no, I don't think he's good enough for me, they would say, oh, you're right. He's not good enough for you. What I needed was someone else. In my case, it was my therapist at the time, to say, is this your fear? What if he is good enough for you and you are judging him because you are afraid of intimacy? So we need people to ask that question. So have a think about how you develop those sort of relationships in your life. Can you see this? And if I perhaps put it like that, is it easier to see? Tell me if you can't see it. It's easier if you can see the whole thing. So wounded child. So look out for these things as signs that your child is running the show. Wounded child, black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, fear-based thinking or acting. And when I say black and white thinking, here's an example. There's only one fish in the sea. It has to be this fish. There are no other fish. It's him or it's her or it's them or it's nobody. It has to be this person. There is nobody else. I'll never feel like this again. I must hold on to this relationship at all costs. So that sort of fear-based, yeah, it's only this one. And then we've got the mature adult, shades of grey, not necessarily the novel or the film, but, the nuances in the middle, the stuff that isn't black or white, the curiosity, what's going on here? I wonder what's going on here. Let's try and find out. A mature adult has a sense of trust, not blind trust, discerning trust, faith-based thinking or acting. You don't need a religious faith, any form of, trust, a form of spirituality, a form of this all is going to go well, provided I take care of myself, rather than this fear-based. So an example of a mature adult is, there are other fish in the sea. I trust that if I act in my best interests, good things will happen. If I take care of myself, I will be taken care of. So I know it's hard to believe sometimes that there is someone else if we've really, been involved in a relationship that we thought was right for us and it's ended. But, if you can hold on to, I trust that if I act in my best interests, good things will happen. And if I take care of myself, I will be taken care of. I think that's really important and true. Oops, I've gone right back. Maybe if I go back. Oh no, sorry. Press the wrong button. Nearly done with the PowerPoint. Play from current slide. So who's driving? Who's driving your car? I use this wonderful picture in my codependency workshop. I somehow think it could be me. So I hope my hair will go that beautiful color and also grow into like long locks, which it probably won't, but she is wearing purple, which is my favorite color. So who's driving your car? Is it the healthy, mature woman, or is it the wounded child? And I'd just love you to keep this image in mind. She looks like she's pretty cool. She's steering, like she's very relaxed. She's going in a straight line. She's in control. She's calm and collected. So who's driving my car? And if you are feeling all flustered, if you're rushing, if you're if you're losing yourself in a relationship, if you're not acting in your best interests, just pause. Who is driving my car? Who's in the driving seat? So what we want is the inner child. We want to place her on the back seat of the car with a seatbelt around her, so she feels safe and secure. So she's still there, she's coming along, but she's not driving. And the mature, responsible, healthy and healed adult is in the driving seat. And then in time, we can pull over and we can let her out and she can play, and then we get back in. So who's driving your car? Is that my next? Yeah. So inner child healing, I'd love to know if you've had any thoughts about what could be your next steps. So we talked about your attachment with yourself. We talked about how to create a stronger attachment with yourself. You want to be really aware of your needs and your wants, meet your needs and wants. Pause and reflect. Notice if you're triggered. Work on calming the nervous system. Process your pain. I know many of you are on the journey of processing your pain, healing your wounds. And, it takes time. It takes time. As I say, I have been on this healing journey for 20 years, lots of different modalities, lots of different forms of support, lots of study. So, do you need, my dog wants me to pay her attention, my little child here. Do you need more support? Do you need, it takes time to get used to understanding your needs and wants. It takes time to get used to meeting those needs and wants, and it takes time to heal. So think about, sharing with others, sharing with trusted friends, sharing with professionals, inner child writing. If you'd like to come and work with me, I can support you to do that. It's also in my courses. The non-dominant handwriting. Just write down your feelings every morning. If you're familiar with Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way and the morning pages, My little dog. Then, she advocates that you write 3 pages every morning, just stream of consciousness, write down whatever's on your heart. And sometimes it's anger, and sometimes it's fear, and sometimes it's frustration. So do you have any next steps, and would you like to share them in the chat? And I will, while you're doing that, I'll just move forwards. So I'm just going to remind you of a few points. Your inner child needs to feel seen and soothed so that she can feel safe and secure. We can't get what we didn't get. So if we're still looking for the parents to come and do their job, remember that that ship has sailed. We have to give up that fantasy and meet our own needs. There's often a grieving process that needs to happen there. But giving up the fantasy that the parents will come and do what they were always meant to do, and then meeting our own needs, being aware of our own needs, calming your fears and soothing your nervous system. So that's a daily action. So do you meditate? Do you walk in nature? Do you pray? Do you journal? Do you do the morning pages, which are the 3 pages of stream of consciousness every morning? Do you exercise, not in a punishing way, but in a self-loving way? Do you speak to yourself? Do you put your hand on your heart and say you are safe? And I want you to hold on to this line. Take uncomfortable actions in your best interests. So this is everyone's challenge, my challenge, your challenge. We have to take uncomfortable actions in our relationships, in our work, in our daily practice. Act in our best interests. It's not always going to be comfortable to speak your truth, to speak up. So we want to do that, and we want to get all the support we need in order to do that, because you are worth it. Healing takes time, so don't rush it. Be patient. I have a couple of courses that I host, and the first section is called Laying the Foundations. And that's where we do the healing. That's where we take care of all the inner child work. And if you're on my course right now, you're doing some of that, so that when we go dating, we are in a healthy space. So we're not going to re-traumatize ourselves by making poor choices. So the healing takes time. Lay your foundations first. So I'm at time. It's gone rather quickly, but I will stay on if anyone has any questions. So I just want to invite you, before I go, if you would like to look at any of the work that I do, I have a tribe, a small tribe of women who are working through my How to Fall in Love, Laying the Foundations, and Date with Courage, Clarity, and Confidence group experience. And the doors are opening again in June for anyone who'd like to join that tribe. And I have an offer that I'll put in an email to you. And if you'd like my support to help you to build that sort of safe space and another healthy attachment in your life, then please get in touch. Again, I'll send a follow-up email. And questions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll just do if there are any questions that you want to type in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording, and I can answer any questions that you'd like to ask live. So I think I'm going to stop the recording, and then if anyone wants to ask a live question, they can. Thank you to those who've watched on recording. It'd be lovely to work with you if you'd like to come and join us.